Hello everyone. Today we are here to discuss an interesting topic in research, hypothesis. Now when I say hypothesis, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Have you heard of this term? Hypothesis can be defined as a simple statement that can be tested, proved or disproved. What is this simple statement? In terms of research, we do understand that there is a phenomena out there which we are trying to be clearer about. And to understand how exactly the reality is, we have our assumptions of how the variables could be related and what could be the results that we can identify conducting certain research. In this aspect of research, hypothesis is a big driving factor to define how the research proceeds further in addition to the terms of which direction the researcher takes. Hypothesis can have multiple components. To start off, we can use this abbreviation called as PICO. PICO is an abbreviation that will help us narrow down our research and a hypothesis to the best way possible and a simple, clear understanding of what is to be done in this research. The first letter P stands for population. Population is what the group that is involved as part of this research. What is the sample group that we are deriving at? I stands for intervention. What is the treatment technique that is followed in order to carry out this intervention in the experiment? Question is that not all research involves intervention. In that case, instead of I, we can refer to this as measurement, how the variable is measured. C stands for control or comparison. Now, when we have an experiment that is being conducted, we have something called as an experimental design or an experimental group, and corresponding to that, we have something called as a control group or the comparison group. So C stands for comparison. The next letter in the abbreviation is O. O stands for outcome measures. What is the outcome that we are expecting once we carry out this research in this particular population, in this particular comparison group using intervention? There are researchers who suggest that we have a fifth alphabet T. T stands for time frame, which is key to the time frame, or it can also refer to as the type of study. Personally, I would suggest this is already understood from the first four letters PICO. Now coming back to hypothesis, depending on this, the population, the intervention, the measurement, the outcome and the comparison group, it will be easy for us to understand what is being researched. How does this statement come across and how do we test this simple assumption that we have about the variable? Depending on the number of variables or the relationship of the variables or the research design, hypothesis can be of multiple types. The broader classification of hypothesis can be null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis merely states that there is no relationship or there is no association or there is no difference between the two variables, whereas the alternative hypothesis states that there could be some difference or there is a significant relationship between the two variables. Under both of this null and alternative hypothesis, there could be multiple variations again. If we have to consider what is the hypothesis leading towards, we could classify this as directional and non-directional hypothesis. When we say directional, it could sound something similar to this. There is a positive relationship between the variables. Another example would be there is a negative correlation between the variables. A non-directional hypothesis would sound something which states that there is a significant relationship between the variables and it does not specify whether it is positive relationship or negative relationship. Another example of directional and non-directional hypothesis could be based on the effect or the influence of the intervention that has on the dependent variable. Now the example of a directional hypothesis could be something like this. There is a significant positive impact of a particular intervention in this variable, whereas a non-directional hypothesis can be something like this. There is no significant impact of this particular intervention in the variable. Next, when we consider the number of variables to form different hypotheses, it can be classified as a simple hypothesis and a complex hypothesis. In a research where there are only two variables involved, we could frame something called as a simple hypothesis. Where there are more than two variables that are involved in a research study, it could lead to something called as a complex hypothesis. Depending on the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable, there could be two types of hypotheses that can be formulated. First type is an associative hypothesis. This nearly states that both the variables are connected or associated in a particular way. The second type of hypothesis is based on the relationship between the two variables, which is called as causal hypothesis. A causal hypothesis states that there is a change or an effect or an influence of the independent variable on the dependent variable. The independent variable has caused a change in the dependent variable, making it a causal hypothesis. Depending on how the reality is, there could be some errors in hypothesis testing, isn't it? That could lead to two types of errors in hypothesis testing, type 1 error and type 2 error of hypothesis testing. Type 1 error and type 2 error can be discussed in the next video. Thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned for more updates and discussions on various research topics. Thank you.